Hello, and welcome to Documentation Not Included, version 7, I believe. And virtual reality is what we're going to be talking about today. We had, as always, some slight technical problems just beforehand, so if you can hear a slight buzz all the way through the podcast, blame this guy here.
My headset
It
is
sounds
dying.
like his headset's dying, so we're going to have to get him to get a real microphone maybe in the future. Anyway, so thank you everybody on Twitch who's joined us. There's a little bit of chat activity today, and as those who have seen us before or heard us before, it's usually Josey that does this introduction. Unfortunately, she has a bad throat, I believe, today, or other illnesses, undisclosed illnesses that she can't join us because of, and she's having a day off, and she works very hard, so, we'll let her have a day off today.
Yeah, unfortunately. Also, that means that there is no icebreaker today, but then again, we all know each other so much, and we've break so much ice in the last some episodes, so
Exactly.
I don't think that's going to be...
I think, Josey said we should do it anyway as a tradition, but, we're the rebels of the group.
Exactly.
Josey's the one who tries to keep us straight and narrow, and we can say whatever we want today as well.
Oh, baby! Does it mean that my fuck counter gonna go over the top?
Well, we'll see. Anyway, that's 2 minutes, by the way. That is the record. That is easily the record so far.
One day I will open the podcast and I will start it by just saying "fuck."
Yes. I was actually looking. I was looking for the Polish swear word. Was it kurwa or something?
Yeah.
See,
kurwa.
I looked it up. I did a Google Translate, and it come up with two completely different words.
Indeed.
So what's going on there?
Well, the same way how fuck means fornication and also the generic, expletive. It's exactly the same thing, except kurwa isn't about fornication, kurwa is about prostitution.
Okay, right. I'm not sure if we have an equivalent in English, but anyway, let's move on. That'll be our icebreaker.
Bitch. Bitch would be that.
Okay, fair enough.
Linguistic lessons.
So, yes, no icebreaker today, but let's get on with our topic, I think. Let's move into it. So, what we were thinking of doing, and this is kind of the way we were planning on doing most of our versions anyway, is, again, people who follow us, we do our episodes, instead of episode 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9, 10, we do versions, and then we patch the versions at some point. Not strict patching, us really anal developers would get a bit worried about 7.1 not actually being a patch. It should be a major version or whatever. But either way, it doesn't matter. It works. So what we're going to do with this, with version 7, is we're going to talk about virtual reality. We were going to talk about virtual reality's future, but it is still very young. And the thing is there's all kinds of emerging things coming out with it as well. There's lots of moral implications. There's lots of technical limitations, as Patryk well knows, having just released a virtual reality game on Steam, which he's very proud of. Again, people who have listened before will have already known that. So yeah, we're going to go.
No better game.
Now, and I was watching it today actually on Twitch, and I quite enjoyed it. It's good, and I'm not sure. I'm still not quite there. I'm not quite ready to buy a virtual reality headset.
It's totally understandable, mostly because unfortunately there is not enough games in VR. There is a lot of something that I call tech demos. Chris is way more lenient with that. He calls them experiences. I personally think it's bullshit. For me, it's just tech demos because it's often just a proof of concept of I can pick up an item in VR.
So I actually just occurred to me what I think of as an experience in VR. Things like, and I'm not sure if you've tried them. I borrowed a Gear VR from a friend last year, and early on this year actually. Very impressed with it. I mean, my Galaxy S6 overheated very quickly and couldn't handle it. But I got a little bit out of it. And I played the Stranger Things experience. Now, it looks like a game, but it's not. It's an experience. You're sat down watching what's going on, and actually, it's quite scary. If you've watched, have you seen Stranger Things?
No, I'm familiar with it. I know what's that about, but
I mean, it's. I'm not going to explain it to everybody listening because it is fairly popular, Stranger Things. But it was quite a good experience. I enjoyed it. You couldn't move. It was essentially just kind of funneling you around and telling you where to go and where to sit and kind of where to hide, basically, from the monsters. But it was good, but it wasn't a game and it wasn't a movie, so it sits in the middle of those two. It's an experience to me.
Yeah, Yeah, it's like an art installation. I think VR experiences, it's a good way to describe them. Like, I'm just being snarky for the sake of being snarky. I'm just being a hater. But yeah, I think experience is a very nice way of saying that. And that could be actually an emerging new art form. Like, you have the same way how art progressed into the performance art, which is sort of like art happening as it goes. It's like almost interactive, and this sort of like it's like performance art. For those who don't know, it's like definitely separate from normal art. And in the same way, I'd say VR experiences are separate from, let's say, movies or video games. It's something in between. It's something very interesting. So,
well, that's an interesting thing, because how's that going to evolve, though? Because we can't really structure this as a before, now, and after. Really, we have to talk about each thing as it comes along. So, when it comes to a movie experience, though, is it going to become? The more that I see, the more uses I see of virtual reality, the more my mind opens to it and thinks about the endless possibilities of what we might be able to do with it when the hardware's caught up. Where does it stop when it comes to movies then? So at some point, is everybody in the cinema going to be able to don a virtual reality headset and have a full 360, well, what's it called, 10...
Yeah, 360 experience, and I'd say definitely not, for a simple reason that movies make tremendous use of framing. So it's like, there is this YouTube channel, Every Frame a Painting, when they do this sort of critique of movies or exploration in movies from the perspective of cinematographer, and he makes you realize all those like little nifty tricks with like framing and like putting stuff exactly where you want it to guide the eye of the viewer, and you just cannot have it when you give the absolute freedom to the viewer. So VR movies, probably like 3D VR movies, probably gonna be a thing. It's gonna be quite shitty at the start, because a lot of the times people gonna just miss out stuff as they happen, so that might be tricky. But once we figure that one out, it's gonna happen. But in the same way as performance art haven't replaced traditional art, it's just like another thing that's happening. I think the same thing is gonna happen with the movies. It's just gonna be another tier of entertainment.
You see, this is what I thought. You know, when all these new technologies come out, 3D TVs, 3D games, the virtual reality, AI, etc. You think it's because historically things like Blu-rays have replaced DVDs, and DVDs replaced VHS, and all. Technology moves on. You think that it's come out. This is the new thing. This is a screen, so it's going to replace what our traditional screens are. Personally, I think way in the future that is going to happen. At the moment, we already have virtual desktops in VR. If anyone's played with them, I think Facebook have got one that they're working on. There's quite a lot of other techie kind of demos out there. Quite a lot of companies exploring it. When I thought initially about having kind of a virtual workspace, I thought about having, I could have millions of monitors.
Yep.
But that's such a limiting way to think about what it could be. And I've looked at some of the other virtual desktops, and it's things like the whole, moving screens around with your hands, or just being able to press a button and it flips into another desktop view very quickly. And it's about an extension of the human kind of physique, isn't it, I suppose, within VR, and allowing you to overcome the limitations of space, being able to code in a desert or something like that. That excites me, actually.
Yeah, like a few weeks ago, I posted a tweet when I said that we are like this close to having humanity's first godlike experience, and that's gonna be essentially building games from within like the VR world, because like the 3D sort of the current VR plug, I don't know the state of current plugins for VR plugins for the things. I think there is a one for Blender, which is a 3D gaming 3D making software. I don't think there is for Maya, but this is gonna happen. And making, I think, modeling in VR is like, it's this close, because we're still having issues with the interface. But once we overcome them, and we will overcome them, that's gonna be literally the better way to go about things, because you have the depth perception. And it goes for so many things. I mean, like, imagine making a video game and be like, let there be light, and you spawn a point light in a scene, and then you can like move it and place it. It's just, it's going to be more efficient, more accurate, and more fun.
I mean, I personally love playing games where I'm building things in a game. And, usually you've got quite a lot of constraints in whatever engine or whatever game has been put together. Everything's got their own systems. Yeah. But it'd be lovely to not have those systems. And the more fidelity I get in a game, I'm thinking of the difference between something like Minecraft, which is great. You can build all kinds of things with it, but you're limited to blocks, really. I mean, blocks and slopes and things like that. Mm-hmm. To things like, I don't know, something like Ark Survival Evolved, where you've got an insane building system that has electricity in it and has all these other things. It's still built around limitations, but being able to build a world with the tools that we use currently to build computer games inside a VR thing, being able to, as you said, zoom right into a one point, and being able to manipulate that exactly how you need to, is going to have so many advantages. When you looked at you remember when Minecraft was bought by Microsoft, and they were showing you what you could do with AR, and you could
the HoloLens.
Yeah, HoloLens, and you could put a lens on, you could zoom. I mean, it was obviously all staged. It wasn't fully there, but at least it was technically possible.
I mean, first limitation of HoloLens, it's not your entire field of view. It's like literally that small of 300 pixels or something. But yeah, I think level editors will gonna have a huge comeback with VR, because building levels can be fun in normal games, but more often than not, it's a hassle. Like it's really pain in the butt. But if you can get that right in VR, you're gonna have the joy of building stuff. It's gonna be like Lego all over again. But it's Lego that you can send into the world, and other players can play in it. It's wow.
So I'm looking forward to the day that it's really useful, because there's so many things I think about using it for. I've actually spoken to you specifically about an idea I have about creating a virtual workplace of some description. Now, there are virtual workplaces out there, virtual meeting rooms. Being a remote worker, it really adds value to what I can offer my clients, really, I suppose, rather than I think I need it. It's more of a value marketing tool. I could say, well, I've got a virtual meeting room. You can come and meet me at any point, and I'm essentially sat next to you at the desk.
Yeah. So, imagine something like that. Everyone is sitting in their own VR. You are all sitting in the same VR space, and everyone has the bubble of their screens around them, and you can just walk over to your coworker and take a look at their screens and start pointing at stuff. There is if you compare that to, let's say, just having voice and cameras, even voice and cameras and screen sharing. There is no comparison of being able to walk over and having audio, which is the spatial audio. So you can when you're closer to someone, you hear them better. When you're further away, you hear a bit. It's gonna be great. It's gonna be amazing. We're gonna have that scene from Matrix, third Matrix, or maybe it was second, when they were. The Zion's a flight. How do you call it? The Zion's flight control. So when the Nebuchadnezzar, that ship of Morpheus was trying to go into Zion, they were showing the flight control, and they were all sort of sitting in their own VR Matrix connected. Yes. And they had those skins and stuff. This is the future, and that was utter sci-fi.
Yeah. If you think about it, how fast technology is moving. I mean, 10, maybe 15 years ago, just sharing your screen, sharing a 1080p screen was possible, but it wasn't reliable, and now it's commonplace.
Yeah, bandwidth issues galore. Yeah.
I mean, it's not just that, is it, with VR? It's not just the limitations that we have in conventional hardware, such as bandwidth, and as the infrastructure grows in the UK, for us, we've already got 200 meg internet, but that'll get better and better and better, and soon everyone by standard will have a gig internet. It'll happen. Yeah. But then we've got the actual physical limitations of the virtual reality hardware. I mean, again, other people who listen to the podcast will, and people who are watching might wonder what that was that just popped up on the screen then. It was Patryk's swimming pool.
No, it's a mug.
It's the largest mug I've seen in my life. In fact, my wife has one of them, but she puts a ball of wool in it to knit. So I should show it so it rolls out. It's a little cheat.
They're great for tea, especially when it's very cold, because
Yeah.
you just have like a half a liter of warmth.
Yeah,
But
I
back
got
to
distracted then. But back to VR and hardware. Sorry. So we've got the problem at the moment of the resolution with virtual reality. We can't read text. You said that on your stream today as well. You couldn't really read the Twitch chat that well.
Actually, after I adjusted the lenses, because unfortunately my headset at work is a working headset, so it's got constantly put on, put off, like things gonna move. And thankfully you can actually adjust the focus of the lens. And once I actually screw it into proper place, it was surprisingly readable. Like at the start when it was like out of focus, it was basically impossible to read. But once I adjusted everything, like it's still, I can't like read from the distance as I have now my monitors, which is like essentially like an arm's length. But that close to a face, it's readable, and it's gonna get better. It can only get better. So we're getting there, and we're getting there fast.
I pasted something in our Discord channel the other day about 8K VR somebody's working on. I didn't even know they were working on 4K VR, let alone 8K. So, I mean, this is a potential use for 8K, because at the moment, when it comes to consumer televisions tend to run to lead the evolution of resolution, don't they? And obviously PCs are ahead of everybody else, but we've got 1080p displays, HD displays. Now we've got 4K displays, which again 5 years ago people looked at and said, why do we need that? The average consumer can't tell the difference between 1080p and 4K, and it's true for the most part. But then we've got 8K displays, and it's even more. What the hell are we doing this for?
But it's slowed down. Like when you saw the march from 480, then 720, then 1080, that was pretty fast. But after we got 1080, that leveled off. Like I still have monitors back in Poland which are 1080p. They're like 6 years old, and I'm gonna bring them with me to Cyprus. Gonna use them. Like 10 years ago, if you would have like a 6-year-old monitor, you would have CRT.
Yeah. No, you're right. I mean, I'm still using my old ones. I've had 2 generations of 4K monitors now, but my old 1080s are still my peripheral kind of monitors. But yeah, I mean,
VR.
I think once we get to a point where I can no longer, I don't want to say see the pixels. It's not that I don't want to see the pixels. I don't mind that so much. It's more about the fidelity of what I'm looking at such a close. It's so close to my eyes that it's difficult for me to be fully immersed, and it's difficult for me to use it long term as well, because I will be straining. I mean, there's obviously the depth perception issue as well, isn't there, with headsets?
You got used to that. Initially, you try to, because you especially when you have like a so the thing that you haven't mentioned is a Fresnel lens issue. So
sorry, I forgot.
Yeah, that's why I'm here. I do this for the living. I got paid to do that. So right now, when you have like a high contrast, when you have something very dark and very light, like I don't know, black text on a white background, for example, but also something glowy in game, you start seeing this sort of like a Fresnel blur of the lens, and that's still not good. But it's not. I don't think we yet hit physical limitations. So, for example, when we have progress of transistors and they're getting smaller and smaller, we're starting to hit point where the transistors are so small that the quantum uncertainty becomes a problem, and we're hitting the hard limits of our physical reality. But we don't have that with headsets, nowhere near yet.
Oh, no.
So it's a bright future for sure.
Yeah, I'd said I'm excited about it, and I don't see any reason why we can't reach these. It is a waiting game at the moment for the early adopters, at least. Anyway, I speak about VR occasionally to non-technical people, to networking groups and that kind of thing. Just because it's emerging, it's coming out. Same with AI, and some people glaze over. Other people are like, well, I didn't even realise VR was a thing yet, really. I mean, we hear about it occasionally, but we still think it's sci-fi, You see advert every now and again with some rehabilitation software that happens to be using VR, and it's a passing thing. It kind of it's on the screen for a second and then and it's not yet fully accepted by the
training and medical is like whole another bug. But before we touch on that, I just wanted to finish on a bit on the gaming, and we were talking about it just before a show. When I started, I had a really interesting thought in my head, and then it just like blew out of my head.
It happens to the best of us. Well, we were talking about hardware limitations, weren't we? So we were saying we've got the resolution issue. We've got things like we can't read text properly. I mean, you said that you could read it, but I want to be able to read text like I can read text in real life. Virtual reality needs to be more immersive. Not a wrong word again. It's really difficult. No. It's so immersive, but it's
immersive. Okay, now I remember. I got it. So I'm not. Even though from you guys who are watching the stream, you might think that I'm an easily excitable person because whenever I'm streaming, I'm like animated and yay. But that's because I talk with amazing people, and it's just joy to be with Chris and Josey. In real life and in gaming, I'm like more subdued. And so, for example, right now I'm playing through XCOM 2. Amazing game, very compelling. I have so much fun playing it, but at no point did that experience ever approach the amount of fun and amazingness that I felt a few hours ago when I was live streaming my game, Shadow Surprising, because you get to feel so cool when you do it. Like you're hooking from wall to wall and you're like grabbing, you're like climbing on the walls like Spider-Man, like some sort of like super cybernetic ninja, and you slash at the guys and you aim with the bow. You actually aim instead of having an aiming reticule, and you throw those ninja stars because got this. It's like the experience is unexplainable. It's like you get to feel so amazingly.
So watching your live stream, I kind of held back with some feedback only because I knew I'd be speaking to you later on. To me, as I said in the actual live stream, to me the AI looked quite dumb. It looked, and you were explaining that what you were doing, you made it look easy because you're used to playing it, but you were having complaints that people felt it was too hard, so you've had to not necessarily dumb down, but you've had to nerf quite a lot of things just to make sure people don't quit out within the first 5 seconds of playing the game.
Yeah, the unfortunate side effect of watching me play is that I know exactly how to exploit the AI in the game because I know exactly how it works. I helped design it, so I know exactly how to go around it. So one of the ways, like when you sort of get spotted by, we get sidetracked, but whatever. When you get spotted by the guard, you have to run away from the guard. But how do you make it that the guy eventually loses you? I mean, like it's part of the system. They have perfect knowledge. So initially we had something like the guard was basically what we set it up on is that you have to sort of lose 2 corners. So when you have like a box and you're here and there is a guard here, you have to turn one corner and the guard lost line of sight, so he's gonna go to the last point when he saw you and look for you. But if he won't gonna see you, then he's like, where the fuck is he? So you have to turn 2 corners to lose the guards, or you have to go in a place where you know that they cannot reach, where they don't have any point where they can see you. So there are like small things that I know as developer that you wouldn't knew as a player, and the AI wouldn't be as dumb. At least it wouldn't appear as dumb.
Did you make those decisions because it's in VR, or because it's part of the game?
Part because it's a game, part because it's in VR. Like the other problem in VR is that you have way less peripheral awareness. Where when you're playing something like Thief or a Splinter Cell game, for some reason it's maybe it's part of the fact that you have a headset, because in headset you have less peripheral vision. Like it's not sort of full 180 degrees. Like here you wouldn't see. You wouldn't see hand. You would start seeing your hand here. So that's like 60-ish degrees that you have out of 180. Right. So that's a huge deal. And that was a huge issue. So a lot of the game development for VR right now is figuring out what kind of limitations we have and how we can go around these things. Like, for example, I've read about a game where if you have your back to your enemies, they don't attack you.
Well, that's a bug, though, isn't it?
They try to get in front of you and then attack you. So in theory, you could cheese the game by like facing the wall and going like, you know, by the wall in theory. Simply because during the playtest, the developers find out that the players were constantly attacked from behind, and they did not like that. And you know, in normal video games with a mouse, once you have like mole vision, second you have like some sort of indicators, which those indicators don't quite work in VR. For some unknown reason, it's a lot harder to sort of notice it because you're so immersed in what you're doing right now, and like you're dealing with the enemies in front of you. You just ignore the UI. So that's interesting.
It is, yeah. It's interesting. It's interesting that we're all the forms of media, movies, film, movies, and even music, to be fair, is using VR at the moment too. I've seen people go to band practice using VR. I've seen I've seen projects rather where they've said that this is a possibility, this kind of thing, and that kind of stuff really excites me. It's interesting that I would be able to collaborate with people across the world without having been in the same room as them. It won't have the same feeling. I wouldn't feel the feeling of the bass. I wouldn't feel the drums.
So close.
It's
so close.
It's going to be good enough for us to again use this to advance the human race. I think personally, I think it's going to be pushing us to the next level of collaboration. But with it, it brings lots of problems. It brings lots of moral issues, lots of physical limitations, and let's discuss those a little bit. In fact, before we do, there was one other thing that's currently holding VR back in my eyes, especially commercially, and that's the price of it. It's coming down. When they were, I think, when was it Vive £800 or £1,200 to start out with?
Yeah, it was like $1,000 like a year ago plus, year and a half. Now it's 400. So it is getting cheaper, and it's like that's a remarkable price drop.
But that's also similar if you look at, again, things like 3D televisions, £2,500 one year, the next year £1,000, which is, the same size, better quality.
Yeah. And at least VR headsets, they have so much room to get cheaper, because you don't need, like, it's not a PC, you don't need any transistors really in. I mean, you have some logic board in there, obviously, but it's not on the, like, it's not a fucking Pentium 4, right? All you need is screens and tracking tracking thingies and accelerometers and stuff like that. And once you start like mass producing them, truly mass produce them, when you can really cut the cost, it's gonna get so cheap. Yeah. I wouldn't be surprised when we're gonna soon, within 5 years, see pretty high-end, like better than right now, headsets for like 200.
Yeah, it'll happen. It happens with everything. Again, I remember Blu-ray players coming out. I remember DVD players coming out and them being an absolute fortune. 400, 500 quid for a something that's £15 now, or even less. It's what happens. It's current, it's still cheap.
I'm a fan of Computer File YouTube channel, which is just amazing. And they, every now and then, there is, I forgot the professor's name. He's like older dude, and he's talking about often about like very basic or historical concepts in computing. And like the first computers were costing bloody fortune, and now you can get like shit like that for 200.
Well, yeah. Again, high-end phones with, what's the newest thing on phones now? It's 4 cameras or wide lens cameras, isn't it?
I don't even know.
The big thing.
I saw like a phone with like a display on the front and display at the back, and I'm like, why is it even needed? I mean, it's amazing. Yeah.
Yes. Okay.
Josey mentioned in chat, what about Uncanny Valley? Do
you not understand what the Uncanny Valley is? Or...
yeah. Do you want to explain it for those that don't know?
Well, the Uncanny Valley is essentially when you view a computer-generated graphic of some description, and please tell me if there's a better description of this.
It's not only so it's like basically anything that's close. So basically, when you like, let's say, build a robot, because it started with robots. When you build a robot, it's like, it's kind of like very roboty. So let's make an axis of like how human-like it's looking is on this one, and how much people like it here. So like around here at the very start, it's like those factory robots, which are totally not human, and no one really feels adorable about them. And then you have something like WALL-E, which, with like big eyes and adorable motions, and that's like getting like, ooh, we like that. And then you get like closer to like something like maybe sort of like anime-ish stylized, and it's like, ooh, it's really nice. Let's make porn of that. And then you go like very close to being human-like. But there is something off, and basically the graph of likeness goes way down. Like, because the psychological basis, as far as I know, and correct me if I'm wrong, is because we perceive those sort of uncanny robots in similar way as we perceive sick people or dead bodies.
I've heard
because
that.
like it's looking like a human, it has a human shape, very human, but that there is just something off, like a little thing.
I was just going to explain at the end of what you just said. Then that's basically my understanding of the uncanny valley, is that we look at something that's human-like, and we know it's not human, but we don't know why. We can't figure out. Have you seen the film Ex Machina?
I don't think so.
It was last year or the year before that it was released, and it's it's a very, very interesting take. It's kind of a Black Mirror-esque. I'm a big fan of Black Mirror, but it's an interesting take on the uncanny valley. Very interesting.
No spoilers.
No. That's all I'm going to say. That's enough.
Okay.
But I highly recommend it. I thoroughly enjoyed it, and it was one of those that kind of it went a bit under the radar, I thought. But it's perfect. It's exactly what I like about films and media, and it's that kind of psychological thriller kind of ride that you get, and there's a lot in there. It's good watch.
Yeah. As for Uncanny Valley, I don't think we're gonna have many VR specific issues. It's like mostly the just generic 3D issues of Uncanny Valley. Where maybe. But the issue that I could see happen is issue with tracking. So right now you can see countless videos, especially from VR chat, where just the model starts spazzing the fuck out because like there is something going off with the tracking, and the inverse kinematics just cannot keep up, and the model starts doing helicopter arms or something, and it's funny.
Yeah.
But if you're gonna have like this sort of very human-like, so imagine this. We get like very human-like avatars to the point when there is some sort of like a facial tracking. So when I'm talking, you can see my avatar moving the face, but it's not quite there. So like maybe instead of like moving normally, it's like.
You've seen Rust, the computer game. It's got that built into it. So when someone talks, the mouths move in time with the talking, but obviously it doesn't track what they're saying.
Yeah, exactly.
But it's really interesting that, because they do, obviously in cinema, they do that. They essentially, see what they react to what the actor, that's the word I was looking for. They react to what the actor's doing and saying, and then, model over the top of that. But
but they have so many like tracking dots on them. When you look at the behind the scenes pictures, they have like the face in dots. It's like 50 dots on a face just for the tracking.
Yeah.
But we're getting there. And
I would say the other issues that we face are things like the psychological issues, the isolation that we may experience as well. So let's say, for example, VR becomes the norm. Everybody in an office has a VR headset sat next to the desk, as well as the monitors, probably, maybe. Yeah. Maybe instead of. We don't know yet. And then everyone at home has one as well. And then everybody, everyone's got a VR headset that's so cheap and they're so good quality and everything's so reliable that it's become commonplace. We don't really, apart from to get a haircut, and this is the case now, we don't need to leave the house unless we need to get a haircut, maybe doing shopping, and even that you can get delivered to your house.
Exactly, yeah.
And, if you want to do shopping, you want to touch, sometimes we do want to go and touch something before we buy it. We want to see how big it is.
Clothes shopping, yeah. No way. Though there are like AR applications right now which sort of like the camera takes the camera takes a sort of like live feed of you, and they overlay clothes on you, and it's actually sort of according to the sizes that you have, so you can see if like the sleeve length is alright. And
see all this stuff that we're mentioning today, and there's been I've wrote a load of other things down on a list of things that VR is currently used for. All this stuff is gimmicks at the moment. Usually marketing gimmicks as well. They're used to sell something or provide a extra value, because the high street isn't what it used to be. I don't know what it's like in where you're living at the moment, but in England our high street is plummeting. Our shops are closing. We basically don't have much going on. There's a bit of a revival, and then they'll all shut down again, and loads of big businesses will go out of business. And we're in a situation where they need to provide an experience over just a place to go to buy something, because we've got that on the internet, and humans are lazy. If we don't have to get up, we don't have to move, and we can get something the next day or now. Interesting
happened in my hometown. My hometown, Old Town, used to be like the shopping center sort of, and you had like a lot of hidden shops, and they all dead, but they're all replaced by restaurants, and they're packed. Like, holy shit! Every single day evening, like just like people galore. So like on one side you say like you're worried about people staying home, but the richer we get as society, and that tends to be the progression. We still have a lot of problems with poverty, but in general, people on average are slightly better off than they used to be, and it's gonna progress, and people gonna have more and more money to go out, and this is what's happening. Like, people are just going out more. So at least in Poland.
I don't think that's the case here. I think people, it's going back up. But we had a bit of a recession. It might have been mentioned at some point, and we had a lot of places closed. All the pubs closed down. You know, smoking ban came in as well, so we don't have people can't go and smoke in a public house anymore, which was one of them. I mean, it was a big thing when that happened. People generally have accepted it now, but it is what it is. But I mean, to socialise, to actually go and see somebody and physically do things with each other, I was a bit worried social media was replacing face-to-face, but VR really could replace it. I mean, social media people are getting a little bit complacent with that now and a little bit bored of it, I think. They're slowly realising it's a time sink.
It could, but I'm not too worried about it, maybe because I just like meeting people in real life, and I assume that everyone does it. But the thing that I am worried about, and that genuinely makes me worry about the future of society, is VR coupled with companion AI. Look at the top five selling games on Steam. I think first or the second one is literally virtual girlfriend simulator.
Really?
Yep. It's a big thing.
Is it a good game? Is that a good simulator?
I have no idea. I have honestly no idea, but at certain point it was bigger than Skyrim VR. So there is market for it. And, you're gonna have... So imagine you have, obviously VR porn, Jesus, and then compelling enough companion AI with VR, so you have suddenly an entity that you can interact sort of in real life, that's also sort of intelligent, or at least you can pretend that it is.
I've just written down virtual girlfriend simulator, and I'm going to look it up tomorrow, because that sounds mad to me.
Yeah, dude, I genuinely think that's gonna be the biggest threat to continuation of our species, because at certain point, how do you compete as a human being with an entity that's literally created to please you?
Mm-hmm.
And is the perfect companion, the perfect girlfriend, the perfect friend.
It's the same kind of, well, obviously not quite the same unless you're a particular kind of person, but it's the same as pets versus children.
Yeah.
You get a pet, and it's essentially, I mean, obviously they're a little bit naughty occasionally, but they're essentially there for you. They don't have any wants and needs apart from a bit of love, food, looking after them, a bit of attention. Kids are totally different. They have completely different requirements. Yeah,
call me old-fashioned, but people who call their pets their children creep me out.
Well, I creep you out. I don't call them my children, but they well, I suppose we do, in a way. It's mummy and daddy, that kind of thing.
Yeah, I feel weird about it. I mean, I can understand why people do it, but I just
Maybe we have that as an icebreaker one week. Or we talk about that in a bit more detail at a later date. But yeah, I know where you're coming from. My best friend's the same. He's always had animals. He loves them a bit, but he doesn't like calling himself dad. So.
Tiger in chat says 3DX chat has a VR headset hookup, wireless male/female toy that can be used with someone in a different part of the world, and it's based off the movement of the person's avatar in the program. I
saw the tech demos for that a few years ago now. Again, I've got no problem with it, but
same.
it's nothing. It's not the same as person-to-person contact and.
Yeah, but it's better than just long distance relationship. For people who are, let's say, soldiers abroad or people who frequently travel, that's gonna be amazing for the relationships. Where you have to be away for extended period of time, and all you have is like calls and emails. But suddenly you can sort of be with the same person in the same space, sort of. So I think it's gonna be great.
So that kind of brings me on to other issues that they could. What about desensitization? What about not really being able to separate? You mentioned soldiers then. Currently, VR is being used by soldiers in military simulations, in battle simulations, and a few other things, virtual boot camps, medic training, that kind of thing. And I've seen this being used. What happens when it gets to a point where a soldier, his only contact with his loved ones at home is within VR. He's training inside VR, and it's a battle simulation. You get to a point where you're in battle, and you fail to disconnect VR from reality. Do you think that could be an issue in the future? I mean, you'd like to think...
Unless we get, like, the Matrix tech, because always, I don't think VR, sort of like the current VR that we have, I don't think it's gonna ever be so real life-like that it's gonna be easily confused. But if we manage to get, like, direct brain-computer interface, like Matrix plugs or nerve gear from Sword Art Online, that's gonna be an issue, because then you're gonna be literally have no way of distinguishing reality from
so implants and that kind of thing, because I mean, it's not, there is obviously some kind of way, there will be some kind of way for us to distinguish reality. If it's an implant, it's not, maybe not going. Actually, we don't know how that's going to play out, because it will happen at some point. I'm sure at some point there'll be some kind of government mandated implant that everybody on the planet has to have, God forbid that happens in my lifetime, but, it will be one of those civil liberties that we give away gradually, like we have with our privacy,
Yeah, it's definitely, I don't think it's ever going to be government mandated, because the minute something like that happens, half of America rises up and, 1776 commences again.
It's not going to be a switch over. It's going to be this Overton window that you talked about before.
It's not going to be forced. It's going to be just more convenient, because look, we all now having GPS trackers on us with cameras and microphones, which are recording every single conversation we have.
Absolutely everything. And I know that's happening. Happening because the other day, and it's not just a convenient thing, this has happened to me way more often than not. I've either been having a conversation with my wife, or she's been having a conversation with me about something. We haven't typed it into Google anywhere. We haven't typed it into any search engines. We haven't put anything on our computers or even on our phones, actually typing it in our phones about this subject. But then adverts have started appearing about this particular thing. Now, back in the day, you used to have this, one bus comes and then three more buses come. They all come at once. And then you have that, or I've just bought a Honda, I can't start seeing Hondas on the road everywhere. So there's always been that, and there's a word for it. I'm sure Josey would know the word for this phenomenon. But I think that we're in danger of that happening. I think I've lost my track a little bit. Got carried away reading chat and while trying to talk. There is actually some quite interesting things being said in chat. One thing we have mentioned, or we've mentioned today, but we haven't talked about in any detail, is VR pornography as well, which is running. It's basically, that is one of the first mainstream things that's occurred with VR, apart from games. I think games kind of, because it's come from the gaming industry, games were the first prototypes, etc. But now I think porn kind of took off with it, and like VHS and DVD and that kind of thing. That they kind of lead the way with some technologies, only because of the sheer number that they sell. Someone's talking about this, 3DX is saying 1.7 billion a year. I'm assuming that's dollars. Either way, it's a lot of bloody money of memberships just because of the hardware, just off sales of hardware.
Yeah, and God bless porn for all the reasons, and also for being the leading tech sort of thingies. But also, again, like Tiger Tiger, you're amazing. You're like the best guy we ever had because you talk about such amazing things. So he's saying that VR training for military purposes has been shown to be actually not all that beneficial, and the soldiers that had VR training and maybe less normal physical training, they actually suffered more PTSD than the normal ones.
It's also been used to treat PTSD as well, which is interesting.
And there is, and like you said, spiky desensitization before, and I'm not worried about that because there was actually a few years ago there was quite a big of a problem in American military where their drone pilots would get PTSD. So guys who were sitting in America and they were literally playing with Xbox controllers because like I saw their setups, they're actually using Xbox controllers to drive drones and Jesus and killing people. And they get PTSD from just causing people to die, and they see that on screen. So that's going to be a problem.
From accident. I don't know. I don't know how people can do that. It doesn't matter what the other human being has done. It just seems a mad place to be that killing them is the only option there. You know.
Yeah.
Anyway.
I wonder what's the difference between like soldiers in live combat and the drone pilots, because as a drone pilot you gotta have some sort of remorse, because if you are in there in person, it kind of feels equal. Like you can kill them, they can kill you. It kind of feels fair. I mean, you have still better equipment, but let's ignore that. But if you're just piloting a robot, you are in complete safety. You just don't give a shit, and you don't fight. You slaughter.
You need a certain mentality to do that, I think.
How's that?
I mean, what was it? Was it War Games that explored that very early in the 80s? The film.
Could be. Also, Ender's Game made really interesting thing where, spoiler, but it's a very old book, so who gives a shit? The main protagonist was undergoing a series of war games. And only after the fact he was, it was like a fight against an alien race, and only after the fact he was notified that he just committed as
genocide.
Not a genocide, a xenocide. He not only killed a group of people, he killed entire species. He thought it was war games that he was playing, but and the shtick was like, oh, you're playing against super advanced AI, which is learning from the way you play, so you have to be constantly on your toes.
Yeah.
Turns out he was sending, those ships that he was sending, that he thought it was just like pixels on screen, they had pilots in them. He sent millions of people to death, and he wiped up entire species.
And it's a good job that's fictional, but it won't be, and it probably isn't fictional.
It could happen, because the better we get with the VR trainings and stuff like that, like we're gonna get to a point where, they might just say to soldiers, "Here, so you are doing like a war games now," and there is like a robotic avatar that they're piloting.
I think that obviously there's always scandals and there's always things that happen that shouldn't be happening, but I think generally the people who are doing it should know. They will know that they're killing people, but this desensitization comes by removing themselves from the situation, like the drone pilots, or even like riding an AS-130 or whatever in the sky and being so far out of range and having a cannon. That's just as bad. But you are in harm's way, but you're still miles. You make it very difficult for the enemy to retaliate if you've got better technology, I suppose. Anyway, let's move on to the next bit.
Yeah. Let's actually talk the total opposite, which is use VR in rehabilitation instead of killing people.
Yeah, we haven't got much time left. We've got 10 minutes left. It went very quick today. Yes, we can do this.
Let's ignore RTFM. There is nothing to rage.
No.
Amazing.
VR's a happy subject for us. Apart from the moral issues that we've mentioned, there's lots of them, and this is the thing. What I'm hoping to do is maybe have a few more episodes where we delve more into the moral issues, more into the sickness and the technical constraints that we have, and that kind of thing.
I've read an article when some female journalist said that she was raped in VR, because in VR chat people were playing around and they did that to her avatar and she felt violated. Whether you think it's a valid thing to feel or not, I could see how someone could feel like that, and I will not pass my judgment on them. But that's another. That could be another problem.
There's There's so many potential problems with it, but there's also the argument that everything that we've ever done, there are problems with it, and we do eventually work them all out. And yes, there are bad people in the world that do bad things with good technology. I think as long as our industry is not, the technology industry is not really regulated in any way, shape and form. Now, the only thing really that worries me in that respect is AI. Yeah. And I think I have a serious worry that at some point in the future we're going to have a rogue AI of some description. Maybe not like it is in the films, maybe not. Maybe it's just going to be a mass leak of all the data in the world to the wrong people. I don't know. Whatever it will be, it's not going to be pretty because we don't have any regulation there. And as much as I'm against it, sometimes it needs, sometimes we need that.
I mean, look, we have treaties about nuclear weapons, and as a private citizen, you cannot have ICBM in your functional ICBM in your backyard. There is a reason for it, and there is probably a reason why people shouldn't have general purpose AI, at least without a factor of supervision. Because I share the view of Elon Musk on this topic that general purpose AI is orders of magnitude more destructive and potentially life-ending than any atomic weapon or any viral weapon that we
because everything's connected. That's the problem. Because everything. Imagine something as powerful as. Did you watch Terminator Genesis?
Vaguely remember. I was a wee lad when that.
No, Terminator Genesis, not the. No, it was out recently. You went wee. It was only a few years ago. It's brilliant. It's actually it's a good Terminator film. I thought. Okay, brilliant. Maybe is not the right word. It's a good film. Arnie's in it. It's good. I'm an Arnie fan. But anyway, the premise in that is that an OS gets released. Like Windows 10. Windows 10 is now the standard for Windows. Everybody has the same thing, and they constantly release updates and big changes in the operating system regularly. That was what happened with this Genesis operating system. It got released, and basically that was the new Skynet, and it basically just covered the entire globe, went over all of the Internet of Things, and just destroyed just took over everything. And that is possible as a programmer who thinks API, who thinks about, my job is to make things talk to each other all the time. If we've got an AI in place that's clever enough to go, these can talk to each other, we can convert this to this, and then we can get these, everything can it can very quickly scan the entire globe and just, it's scary. Anyway, AI is a different subject. I went a little bit of a tangent there.
Which we should probably talk about. So, Josey, if you're still listening, can you get us like AI expert on the show? Because that would be fucking amazing.
There's a few people actually I might be able to reach out to.
Please
possibly.
Do, because that's such crazy stuff. Yeah.
I mean, there was another thing I read today actually when I was doing a bit of research on VR is military torture.
Oh Jesus.
Yeah. So. It's a concern. I don't think there's any evidence of this happening, but people using VR to essentially torture and get prisoners to speak. Now, conventional torture is bad enough.
Yeah, I mean the problem with that is that anyone who's let's say information extraction specialist, let's use the official euphemism for the thing, anyone will tell you that torture is not effective. The effective way to get information from someone who doesn't want to give it to you is essentially to befriend them, to sort of like convince them that you are their friend and that they are so fucked up that you are the only person that can help them. And it was interesting thing because when President Donald J. Trump of America was campaigning, he was like, we should torture terrorists and their families. And then the General Flynn, I think it was some American general was like, yo, this is a retarded idea. That's totally not how it's work. No, just no. We do these things differently, and those are actually effective ways to get about getting information. And to credit of Trump, he said, okay, yeah, I guess you're right. You're the spec on that. I won't gonna tell you how to do your job. So I'm not afraid about that sort of torture for information structure.
I can't quite think of an application for it. It was just something that I read and it was interesting to think, well...
But torture for torture's sake, because you get bunch of sick psychos. So...
Well, yeah. again, it's again bad people using good technology for the wrong thing, isn't it?
Unfortunately.
We've got things like manipulation of the human mind, and we have this at the moment with advertising in computer games, in fact, and everywhere that we go. It's increasingly becoming a problem. I have ad block on my I'm one of them. I have ad block on my browser, and it's increasingly becoming a problem going to websites because they have these please turn your ad blocker off all over it. And it's like, no, because I've got it on out of choice. The internet's a free place. It's not, if I want to subscribe to you, put a paywall up, if that's a problem. But anyway, but within VR, there's the whole new learning experience that we as consumers also have to spot whether it's an advert or not as well. Because even in games, I very rarely spot when an advert is in a game. It's not blatant. It's not obvious. It's it might just be a backdrop. It might be something that's on a package of something you look at briefly. But it's there, and there's a moral obligation again there for us to not abuse that.
From what I remember, I remember reading, I think it was on Gamma Sutra, I believe, those article that it's not all that effective, because for example, FIFA tried to sell advertising space on their virtual stadiums for companies, and some companies did study about it, and it was basically, well, people are way too focused playing the game, and then they just don't give a shit. They treat it as a backdrop. They don't even they did some studies for eye tracking. Your eye literally doesn't even go in that area of screen. So that one, I'm not too scared.
No, but again, there could be new things that come out because it's a new technology that are immoral, I suppose.
There are definitely a lot of things because the thing is so new. We don't know how much we don't know, and I think history showed us that usually when the new tech happens, we are way more scared about the potential bad implications that the really turns out happening. And it's good because it means that we're actually safeguarding against the potential badness. So I'd rather be a bit panicky now and be like, I guess it wasn't a big deal, than wake up one day in your boring dystopia.
Yeah, no, I mean, I'm not one for to bat technology away just because it's potentially scary. I'm more about how do we make it more secure for people? How do we make it more friendly for the consumer? That's what I'm more interested in, more than, because I'm not going to be someone who uses it for bad things. I'm going to be someone who looks at it and goes, "Oh my god, this is so exciting! I really want." No, like that's what us developers generally do.
There was this virtual experience where you had basically VR headset, and you had to you were very high up on a skyscraper, and there was a plank that you had to go on a plank to save a cat. And in real life, they would put some plank on the ground so you could feel that there is a height difference, and people would panic. People would fall, people accidentally step off the plank, and they would. Even though they have a ground right here, it's a difference of 2 centimeters. They would fall on the ground, flay their arms, panic, destroy headsets, total mayhem. So some people definitely take VR as it's more real than not. On the other hand, first thing that I did in VR was jump off a skyscraper. I was hey, that's fun. Let me try to step off.
My legs feel funny whenever I look down when I'm playing VR. I look down and I see my legs. My legs feel funny when I'm up heights as well. So I get the same inertia, I suppose, or whatever it's called.
Vertigo?
It's not vertigo, but it's a kind. I feel the same as I would in real life in VR, which is kind of good. Kind of.
It's amazing.
It's amazing, but I mean, it is. If anybody who's watching who hasn't had a go at VR headset, just go to your local convention. Every games convention these days has at least one there, if not 12 now these days.
There are also VR cafes and stuff like that.
There is. I mean, I'm not sure I know of any where I live. There's probably in big cities, Manchester, Liverpool, there's probably some VR cafes there, I'm not sure. But there's plenty around. You've got an opportunity to have a go. Bear in mind that if you do use it for a long time, you may at the moment get a bit of VR sickness, which is, it kind of comes over you. For me anyway, it came over me. I was very hot. I got a bit flushed and I had to lie down, physically had to lie down for about an hour. I couldn't get up without feeling really ill, but I didn't throw up or anything like that. Other people have worse reactions. Some people don't
you get nauseous, and a huge part currently of VR game development is trying to mitigate it and find it how action packed, because basically it's like your eyes and your inner ear send signals to your brain, and what they send just doesn't match up, and that's what it causes. But you can do a lot of stuff that sort of tricks your brain. So it's a very dodgy area that we're still working on as developers, and we're getting a lot better. Like you could see my game, Shadow Surprising. You can be really mobile in it. Like you can swing from wall to wall. I don't get nauseous.
No, and I've heard that kind of thing does make people nauseous. So it's interesting watching you play that.
It's definitely part getting used to it, but it's also part like those small adjustments that we did in terms of how we move the player through the play space to make it better. It's obviously not perfect for everyone. Like some people just be more susceptible to VR sickness and they will never get over it. Some people will never have it. Some people will be somewhere in between when they get used to it. It's a new tech. We'll see how it goes. Maybe we're gonna someday come up with some sort of way, maybe like some electrical impulses that like trigger your inner ear to send the appropriate signals. I mean, that would be fucking amazing. Imagine falling in VR and actually feeling like falling.
Oh, no.
Skydiving in VR.
That.
I want it.
I don't want that, because I can go and do skydiving if I want to do that.
That's expensive, and it's a risk of death. Or like that. Skydiving relatively safe. What about those jumpsuits, like the sort of suits that have like wings that you
wingsuit?
Wingsuits when you jump off the mountains and glide. I so want to do this. But I probably gonna. But A, it's so fucking expensive, and B, you have like 20% mortality rate on that, so like I don't feel like rolling 1d4 and like, am I going to die today?
Yeah, I know where you're coming from, but I think as soon as we start plugging things into our brains, that's when I'm going to be really skeptical about it. I'd love the idea of having a neural connection directly in there that really immerses me in something, but better than life. That's all I'm going to say to you. BTL chips. Have you played the Dragon? You'll have heard of Red Dwarf.
Red Dwarf, dude, you're bringing up all the stuff that I don't know. I feel inadequate.
God, it's an English. It's an English comedy, quite a low budget comedy, but it's based on a book by a guy called Doug Naylor, and it's futuristic in that they're on this big mining ship, and a catastrophe happens. It's all funny. It's comedy. It's ridiculous English kind of British comedy. But Red Dwarf. Oh my God, you haven't seen Red Dwarf? Have you not even heard of Red Dwarf?
I haven't even heard of it. And it's like, is it the type of humor that you have with Blackadder? Because
yes, it is. It's exactly the kind of Blackadder type thing.
Okay.
No, honestly, right. We need to stop the show. We need to move on. I can't believe you haven't seen Red Dwarf. That's madness.
I'm gonna watch it right now.
We haven't, unfortunately, talked about the future of VR, which was what this episode was going to be about in the first place. We were going to talk about things like potential for holodecks, the virtual workspaces, which are kind of starting to become. We've talked about them a little bit, but they're starting to become a reality now.
The treadmills.
We're going to talk about more ethical issues, things like using virtual reality to perform surgery.
Rehabilitation.
Rehabilitation, VR courtrooms, therapy. There's so many applications that are all being explored at the moment, and there's so many companies doing it. But it's so widespread, and there's not that much of an adoption yet. It will be the future, and that's what I'm saying. So yes, thank you to everybody in chat. Thank you for being very vocal today. You've given us some great talking points as well as what we were going to talk about, and. Thank you.
Great, guys. Yeah. Don't forget to visit our website, dnistream.live, where you can find all the links about the podcast. YouTube, Twitch, Twitter. What else do we have? All the things. We have all the things.
GitHub, Discord. We do have our own GitHub repo where I'm currently only got the website in there, which I'm currently working on. I'm trying to get the show lists working, but we're currently potentially thinking of moving podcast hosts. We're not sure yet at the moment. There's a few technical issues we're having. So yes, you can use our contact form on our website to get hold of us if you've got any topics that you would like us to discuss. If you would like to be a guest, we love having people on here. We unfortunately didn't have time to get someone today. Josey usually does that. So if you get hold of us via the contact form, we'll get back to you and book you in, probably, if you're interested enough, if you've got something to say. Usually our guests lead the topic as well, so yes, feel free.
Yeah, you can also tweet to us at DNI Stream, and also follow us, because we post the most interesting things. We have literally the best Twitter on entire Twitter sphere. So do that. Go and follow us at DNI Stream.
Indeed. And we hope to see you next week, 7 o'clock Thursdays, every Thursday, come rain or shine. Josey will be back with us next week, I'm assured. So if you miss her lovely female tones, then please come and see us next week and join in the chat.
Yep.
Actually, next week we also have a guest.
The best guest.
Yeah, Josey's talked him up, somewhat rotten. There's a guy called Hamid I've practiced this earlier, and I still can't say it. Shojahi. I hope that's correct. I'm sorry if it's not Hamid. And he's from Axosoft. So they're the people that you may have heard of the piece of software, Axosoft, which is an agile kind of management tool. And they also do something that we use for DNI Stream, which is something called Gitkraken. And that's kind of a Trello board, kind of an agile board, Kanban board rather. And yes, so we're looking forward to having him. He's done lots of talks and he's got lots of YouTube videos, etc. out there. So we've got high hopes for him. I hope he's not feeling the pressure.
We're gonna be talking about how to take your idea, like how to get from idea to a product, and that's gonna be really interesting because everyone has ideas, but not everyone quite knows how to turn it into product.
No, I'm one of them people, so I'm going to be all ears next week. I'm hoping that he is going to spark the next part of my career, which is hopefully productizing something that I've developed.
Game dev is, not game dev, development. All the programmers and developers are woefully inadequate in terms of marketing and business strategy. So that's going to be super interesting and super useful episode for everyone involved, I think.
Absolutely. So thank you very much to everyone once again. Thank you, Pat.
Thank you, Chris.
Catch you later, everyone.
Bye-bye.